Hey Rachel, Nicholas Wilt here for Monroe Confidential. Thank you so much for agreeing to appear on such short notice, but we have some time sensitive things that I thought were important to discuss and to put out there. You've been a leading voice in filling the gaps in local media who often fail to cover these important political stories. And the thing that I wanted to talk about and lead with is the appointment of Amy Grower
Mm.
as deputy county executive. You know, the press release from county executive Adam Bello is glowing. He says she's an eminently qualified public servant. She's been his chief of staff for 5 years, so I guess he's in a position to know that personally. But I think you and I both think some skepticism is warranted. But
I don't
you
know if I,
also
yeah,
Well,
go
you
ahead.
also have been doing just yeoman's work in coverage of this opt-out legislation that the county ledge just voted on, which is incredible to me. I mean, if I'm understanding it correctly, the state passed legislation that makes it so that short-term rental owners who often shroud the beneficiaries of the ownership of real estate. And I can tell you, many houses in Rochester are not owned by people, they're owned by LLCs. Am I given to understand that this new state law would require disclosure and that the owners of these LLCs would be easily made available to the public?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. New York State passed a law essentially saying every county has to pass a registry for these short-term rentals or Airbnbs. And so owners would have to go pay a fee, register their property, and provide certain information. And Monroe County decided to opt out. So this state law did give counties a way to opt out. There were other benefits other than just data. There was also uniform tax collection, ways to make sure that all short-term rentals have to collect this tax, and enforcement tools. So problem properties, you could do the state AG, you can have local. I mean, just having the data, knowing whom to contact, that's big. But Monroe County did not want to opt into this registry. And right away I thought, well, this doesn't sound right. And so I looked up who was the lobbyist for Airbnb in Monroe County and what kind of lobbying activity took place, because I think that's really important. The law that Monroe County introduced was so favorable to Airbnb as it had to be written by Airbnb. It turns out it was. So we'll get to that. But the lobbying record showed that one of that Airbnb's main upstate firm was Ostroff and Associates. And Ostroff and Associates has been a longtime associate of Congressman Joe Morelle. Rick Ostroff has been. And one of the lobbyists on the payroll and on the Airbnb account is Nick Morelle, Congressman Joe Morelle's son. And so right from the start, I thought this is bad. This is probably why Monroe County decided to be the only peer county among the major counties to opt out of this. Because that's important. I mean, Monroe County really stands alone here in making this decision that's against its own interests, against the interests of its people. And the big tie was the big reason why is Nick Morelle. So I immediately asked for records. I said, I want all the lobbying records. I want to know the emails. I want to know when you met. I want to know if you traded draft bill language. I want it all. So they gave it to us 3 hours before the vote. And I think it needs to be emphasized that this was also introduced as a matter of urgency, which means it bypassed the committee process. We usually have 2 months to work on these local laws. They waited to the last possible minute. We have to opt out by the end of the year. That's the deadline. So the record showed they've been working with Airbnb since April on this legislation, on going back and forth on what it looks like. And they also were working on a voluntary contribution agreement, which is essentially an agreement saying we don't want each one of our operators to have to remit taxes. And I think that makes sense because it's hard for each one to collect the occupancy tax and remit it when you're on these platforms. That's fine. So the voluntary agreement says, okay, Airbnb will collect the taxes on behalf of the owners and we will send it in. The problem is the now we've seen these VCAs and I've been going through it all day today. The problem is there's no way to know if these receipts are accurate. There's no data on the number, the rates, the occupancy. Essentially, they're held to a dramatically different standard than hotels. And we don't vote on these VCAs. The legislature doesn't vote. So I'm going to be unpacking quite a bit of this on my Substack. I'm going to be unpacking why the legislature doesn't vote, and I think we should. I'm going to be unpacking some of the arguments that Airbnb made behind closed doors to opt out and some of the fuzzy math that they used. I'm going to be looking at the language that went back and forth between the county and Airbnb. It's pretty wild. The county originally had the right idea about getting the data that we need to understand this activity in the market, and somehow it was stripped out. I haven't gotten that far
Somehow.
yet in the packet.
Uh, Now, when they say owner, though, could you create an LLC called, I don't know, Motherhood and Apple Pie and
Sure,
have it become the owner holding title to a
absolutely,
property? And then,
absolutely.
so this is different. See, naively, I thought this might be related to the LLC ownership issue where, um, as far as I know, nobody's required to publish, like it's not available to the public who owns a given LLC. Law enforcement can do
Um,
it
you
maybe
can
with a warrant, but
Yeah, I mean, you can unwind a lot of it, particularly in the city because they have their building blocks website now. I mean, you can unwind a decent amount, looking at mortgage documents. I mean, there are things that you can do, but yeah, you can't always figure out who owns a property. It's not always evident. I think the issue with Airbnbs, and I gotta tell you, like, I'm not anti-Airbnb. I think they have a role in the market, but I think that you need to regulate it and understand it. And because Airbnb really, in their communications with the county, really tried to downplay the activity in the market. But there's a lot of activity in concentrated areas, is what I think is probably going on here because they tried to say, well, our typical host only does 60 nights a year. Well, that doesn't match up to the tax receipts. The tax receipts suggest that's a quarter. If we were to take the number of hosts, they said like 700 something hosts times 60 nights a year, that actually is only a quarter's worth of tax receipts. So if you go on maybe $120 a month or a night average, so you can back into how many nights you think is actually happening. You can back into it. You have to make some assumptions and show your math. But the math just doesn't add up unless Airbnbs cost a fortune in Monroe County, which we know they don't. So um, I mean, I guess the bottom line is Airbnb doesn't want regulation. They don't want to give over their data and they don't want to. This has been going on around the country, but they are really adamant that they do not want to tell you how many nights, what the rates are, and where these properties are. They don't want to do it. And Monroe County essentially said, okay.
yeah. And yeah, there have been a couple of episodes where Monroe County led in the worst way possible. And I guess I'm just going to have to add this to the list. And I personally am looking forward to these further revelations about this. I think it's a story that isn't being covered
Oh yeah,
adequately. And
it's going to be, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot more work than I thought. And, you know, I think so I'm a former reporter. I used to cover stories like this. I think the reason it's not being covered properly is there are a lot of different reasons, starting with there's not a lot of institutional knowledge. So to understand even why this is a big deal beyond just the policy decision, you need to understand the relationship between Joe Morelle and County Executive Adam Bello. Like you need to understand that relationship, number one.
yeah, we're going to
Number
talk
two, you
about
have to,
that type of thing later in the
yeah,
show, actually,
and
because
right, and you have,
like it's
yeah,
not a coincidence that
no,
a former aide of Congressman Morelle is now the county executive, and another former aide to Congressman Morelle is now our county clerk. These aren't
right. I mean,
coincidences.
No, it's political machinery at work. And so reporters really need to understand that and have that background, and there aren't a lot left. Number two, you have to understand what is lobbying. What are campaign contributions? How is our government influenced, and what is your job as a journalist to tell the public how our government is influenced? I had to walk one reporter through looking up state lobbying records. They didn't even know how to do that. And I had mentors to help me with that. These people don't have any mentors anymore. And I think finally there is just this tendency to want to do he said, she said journalism. So, I'm presenting facts. I'm saying, look, this happened. Like they gave me a 169-page document that had tons of emails showing like this act, the dirty deed happened. Nick Morelle did the thing, like he did the lobbying. They traded bill language, and they still framed it like, well, Rachel Barnhart says this happened. Like, no, no, this happened. And then it allowed the county executive, Bello, it allowed him to have his communications person say, Rachel Barnhart's telling a story. It's compelling, but it's just a story. Very Trumpian, very Trumpian stuff. It's like, I'm not telling
Yeah.
the story that I'm telling. Here's the evidence. And fortunately, the Democratic Chronicle and WXXI, they did do good stories. I mean, this is the best I could hope for, I guess, but they did mention Morelle. They did put the stuff in there. I just think that it needs to be like, to me, it's the headline. It's not the thing. It's not like a side thing. It is the headline. It is the feature. It is why this all happened was Joe Morelle. Because without Joe Morelle, there's no Nick Morelle. There's no Airbnb lobbying contract. There's no wide open welcome into Monroe County office building. None of that happens without Joe Morelle and Adam Bello and their
Yeah.
relationship.
And I think the reason you're highlighting this is causing so much consternation is because he really wants to try to keep his hands clean. He doesn't want people to understand what a long shadow he casts across Monroe County politics. And I guess the news that Adam Bello had appointed Amy Grower as deputy county executive can be fit into this context because why was there a vacancy at that position? Because Jeff McCann was elected Greece Town Supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And he, of course, is the perfect Morelle candidate, right?
Yeah.
Cross-endorsed with the Conservative Party, literally a former Republican.
He didn't even need the Conservative Party endorsement. That game that they played in the age of Donald Trump, the Conservative Party in New York State is extremely pro-Trump, pro-mass deportation, anti-reproductive rights, anti-union, anti-climate, anything. That move made me ill. And not only was it just like a political ploy to get more, they wanted votes across, the political parties and made them look bipartisan, but that's not really the only thing that happened here. Essentially, my colleagues on the legislature sold a water authority seat in order to get him that Conservative Party endorsement. It was one of the worst before this. I mean, this might actually be the worst. But before this incident, the water authority thing was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my 6 years on the legislature. Because what happened was the president of the legislature says, I want to reappoint Scott Naska. He is a Conservative Party executive committee member in Monroe County, and he has been the board chair for a while. It pays like $10,500 a year, I think. And for years, Democrats complained that we had no access to the Water Authority board because state law says you have to put two parties on the board. But the Republicans were cute about it and did Republicans and conservatives. So we finally get a chance as the majority to put our fair share on this board. And instead of doing 3 Democrats, we do a conservative and 2 Democrats. And there was no reason for it. No reason for it. We were told, oh, well, it's bipartisan and it's continuity and he does a good job. It's like, give me a break. A grand jury in 2009, and I know this because I covered it, a grand jury recommended we stop this stuff, that we don't have people serve more than a couple terms, and we just didn't listen to what the grand jury. I mean, I gave all this to my colleagues. It was awful. And then you had Bello enlist CSCA, a union, to call legislators and get them to go for it. Listen, it was an atrocious display. And I said when this happened, the only reason we're doing this is so Jeff McCann can get the Conservative Party endorsement. And guess what? I was right. And at the very same time, I was raising the public alarm about it. It turns out, we've learned months later, that a Conservative Party official locally resigned over this mess because of the Jeff McCann endorsement. Resigned. So I was right all along.
Wow.
And and it's funny because my ally in this was like a Conservative Party official, but we both saw the problem here. And this is how our government operates. We sold a government board seat to get Jeff McCann the Conservative Party endorsement. Now, you mentioned Amy Grower. Amy Grower, I believe, worked on Bello's campaign back in 2019. Look, I am not willing to say she's not competent. I hate doing that to women in particular. I don't like doing that.
Oh, I'm right there with
I
you,
believe she's an
Rachel. I
attorney. Like,
first met
she's
her.
great. Yeah.
I first met Amy at a house party for her dad. Because when we were back new in Rochester, I don't know, 2017 or something,
Yeah.
we had some common history because Howard Mafucci was a teacher at Barker Road
That's
Middle
her dad.
School
Yeah.
when my wife Robin and I were students there. And I'm dating myself, but draw your own conclusions about Howard from that. But yeah,
He's terrific. Howard's terrific. I learned so much from him, his budget analysis. I really think he's very wise. But the fact is, his daughter is the deputy county executive now. And there is, I don't, people get really mad at me when I point this stuff out, but you can't serve two masters here. You can't serve the public while also serving your kid. And and I don't I have now shown you this opt-out. Like, I have a million different examples of how I believe my caucus just really voted for Bello and not for the people. And it is not possible to separate these decisions, to tease these decisions out when you are so close to the people who want you to vote a certain way. We have other family ties on the legislature. One person's wife is a deputy director in a department. Another person's brother-in-law is the assistant county executive. I mean, this to me contributes to dysfunction. And I am not, again, impugning the integrity of anyone involved, but they shouldn't potentially be in positions where they are stuck like this, because you're always going to choose the mortgage, the job, the kids, and it goes even beyond that. It goes beyond the nepotism. It's also, look what happened to me, even in the short-term rental debate. They come out and they say I'm a vengeful, awful person who's on her own little crusade, despite the fact all my neighbors came out to speak. It's very insulting to them. But they personally attack me. They smear my character. It's really, they say I'm making claims. It is horrific. And then they run primaries against me, spend thousands and thousands of dollars to try to beat me. That is stressful. Okay. As a human, I know nobody cares about elected officials, and I know nobody cares about my feelings, but I cannot begin to tell you how stressful that is to deal with this, to be someone who speaks out, to do what I think is right, and then to constantly have a target on my back, and have to deal with this kind of harassment, because that is sort of what it is. And this is how they operate. And so, do you think that my colleagues, whether they're related to anyone in the administration or not, do you think they want to deal with that? They do not. And I don't blame them. It is easier. I mean, I do kind of blame
that's why
them.
only
I do kind of blame
people
them, but
voted
it is
against.
easier. Yeah, it is easier to take the path of least resistance with this crew. It is, I don't think people understand the toxicity involved. On Reddit, there was a really good discussion about this opt-out legislation. And finally, this person's we're going back and forth, and finally this person said, I don't get it. Why are you guys doormats? I'm like, oh, I probably should have started there.
Started with an explanation as to why people willingly lay down and let more powerful politicians walk on them.
Yes, because this person didn't understand why we didn't make a rational decision, and I kept trying to explain, and they weren't buying it. And I was like, wait a minute, okay, I get it. I understand what you're trying to say now. You're being really rational, and you're assuming that my colleagues are being really rational, and they're not. And they came up with like all of these excuses for why they couldn't do the opt-out. And to be honest with you, some of the the best excuse was, we don't have time to deal with this right now. It's too complicated. We don't have enough
Because
information,
they've
and
only
we
been
can
working on
opt
it
in.
since April.
But the legislature didn't. We did not. We had the budget to deal with, Thanksgiving. We only had a private briefing with the administration 1 week before we voted. And again, did I mention we had the budget to deal with? Like, this was set up in a way that legislators simply could not absorb any other
Yeah,
information.
the time
That
pressure was
no
engineered.
Right, that no persuasion could take place, no legitimate persuasion could take place from the public. It was all engineered that way. So I had colleagues saying, we can opt in later. And I can make the argument that that was a responsible decision, but we don't operate in a normal legislature where we actually can take this up again without the county executive. So I have a friend who basically was like, you shouldn't tell people that, because now people are going to think they're going to give up, and they're not going to want to fight anymore because you just told them it's dead. I'm like, well, I mean, you got to go the head of the snake. That's how to get what you want on this. You have to keep pushing, but the the best way to push is legislators, but you cannot forget the county executive, because he controls the legal department that advises us. He and also, and the other thing I will say on this, I've gone on and on and on. Also, in defense of my colleagues, a little bit. They trust the county executive, and they trust our legal department, and they trust them more than they trust me and the information that I've provided. So that makes me sad. I don't know what I'm supposed to else to do other than do what I've done my entire life, which is continue to just give information to people. But they trust the legal department. They trust the county executive. So when the county executive and the legal department is telling them, no, this is all the way, this is great. They lied to us. I mean, I'm gonna use the word lie. They lied to us. They were so disingenuous and misleading to me that I thought that they lied to our caucus and lied to the legislature. So what am I supposed to do when you have people who cannot wrap their heads around this kind of conduct from people that they trust and that they like? Like, I don't know what you're supposed to do, but it's a sad, sad state of affairs.
Well, and I think for voters, especially if they've been voting someone into office for some time, it's unwelcome news for them for this revelation. You know, they find out belatedly. They're like, wait a second, are you saying this has been going on all this time? And find out from people inside that, yes, it's been going on the whole time. You know, because there's a little bit of boosterism, or it's like rooting for sports teams,
Oh, sure.
in
It's
electoral
the
politics at
hyper-partisan.
times.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
hyper-partisanship. And I don't do myself, and that's the one of the biggest accusations against me. She's just doing things for herself to get attention. As I've just explained, it would be a lot easier for me to keep my mouth shut about all of this. It's not in my nature to do that. I believe I'm performing the best public service that I possibly can in this legislature at this moment, which is to be the watchdog, which is to be the person who tells you exactly what's going on and how these decisions are made in our government. But might not be the most politically expedient thing for me to do. That said, I believe my voters actually do appreciate it. They do know who I am, but so far I've survived. who knows how long I will survive because of these dynamics. It's tough. It is tough. And as you say, the hyper partisanship, but we're noticing some cracks, Nick. So let's talk about some good things that happen here. You know who tried to get legislators to vote against the opt-out? Indivisible Rochester, which can be a little establishment, you know? No, they were watching. So we have groups beyond the traditional progressive groups now. We have groups watching and they're not happy. They're not happy. So some good happened here.
Yeah, the 5051 group is one of the ones I was planning on sharing this video with, just because I think it's starting to dawn on them a little bit just how complicit the Democratic establishment is in the depredations of the Trump administration, actually. You know, if you have a sheriff who was recruited by the Democratic establishment, admitted to voting for Trump on the radio, who leads a department that cooperates with ICE, which is frankly terrorizing our Black and brown neighbors at this point, and was just reelected unopposed, cross-endorsed on the Democratic and conservative lines,
Yeah.
then the wheels start to turn and you say, well, wait a second, you know, maybe this isn't strictly about party, maybe something bigger is happening. And the something bigger is kind of what we try to cover at Monroe Confidential. And, you know, there's so many other things we could talk about. The strategic timing of that legislation, there's a lot of other areas where timing is strategically weaponized against voters, you know, with timely resignations,
Oh,
carefully
sure. Oh,
timed to
absolutely.
engineer appointments so that politicians can run as incumbents instead
Well,
of
I think New York, right, and New York State, we don't have primaries for special elections. That has to change. Specifically, I'm talking about Congress and state Senate and state assembly. DA, we don't. I mean, there should be primaries for special elections because you can engineer kind of like what Chuy Garcia did in Chicago. You can pull that move here in New York State. People don't understand that you can do that. The other issue is the
well, wait a
petition swap.
second. Could you explain? Because I'm
Yes.
missing that context.
Okay, two things. There's two ways to engineer sort of who your successor is in New York State. The one that is most closely aligned with Chuy Garcia is the petition placeholder move. That's how that's how AOC, the guy she beat, who was he? Joe Crowley back in the
Joe
90s.
Crowley,
That's how he got on the ballot. I don't know if you that little piece of history for you.
that doesn't
He
surprise me.
he never petitioned to get he never the congressman he worked for retired, swapped him out. So that is and you have a 4-day window to do that in April. And you can petition one person on, and then everybody just decides we're going to swap it out. And so you could do that. The other issue is the special election game. Now, to do the special election game, you have to control the party. You have to control the committee. And we know that there are people who control the committee. So you could say, well, I'm gonna resign early in my term, and therefore there will trigger a special election in a few months. The governor calls it, of course, but we're gonna trigger and in a special election, each party gets one candidate, and that's picked by the Democratic Party committee people. And in Monroe County, those outcomes are typically very predictable because the committee, Joe Morelle has a lot of seats on that committee. I mean, I tried to make inroads into Arundecoit, where I now represent a portion of Arundecoit, and I have supporters in Arundecoit, like really wonderful neighbors who would like to serve on the Democratic committee. So I helped them petition to get on the ballot and to run to be on the committee. And Joe Morelle ran a scorched earth campaign against his neighbors, against his neighbors. In fact, one of
Yeah,
the one of
there's
the
been some
candidates was Nick
ferment.
Morelle, who
Yeah, there's.
beat my people. But listen,
Mhm.
it was I can't I shouldn't admit this, but I'll admit it. I can't in good conscience ever ask my neighbors, ever ask my constituents to do that again. I can't put them through that. It's not worth it. They just want to serve. And then to have people calling their neighbors and saying they don't even live in Irondequoit when they live like right on the block, like I can't put people through that again. It's not fair. These are just neighborhood committee seats. It's not fair.
Yeah, well, there's also the appointment process, which precedes the special election, because Sandra Dorley, I think
Hmm.
the writing was pretty clear in the wake of her very public, she's publicly disgraced. And for some reason, she stayed in role for just long enough
Oh
to
yeah.
resign with timing that ensured that Irondequoit Town Justice Brian Green
Yeah.
would be
Oh, well,
appointed
my theory is
to,
that before the traffic stop ever happened, this was always the plan. It was always going to be the plan. I really truly believe that because she knew that this seat, the DAC, was going to a Democrat. She knew that because of the enrollment, the trends and everything. She
yeah,
knew that, and she wanted to have maximum control over who succeeded her. And Bello colluded with her, I believe, because he did not want a progressive to be on any ballot with him, and Joe Morelle didn't want any progressive DA person to be on the ballot with him. Brian Green was the solution. They all know each other really well. Dorley was very pleased with Brian Green, and I think that's what happened here. And
yeah,
and I think the sad part is I think Brian Green always would have been the guy given our system, but it precluded any woman, minority from stepping up and running in a primary or even a committee race to get that line. So, and no one's going to run next year. Brian Green will be, firmly entrenched, and
yeah, I
people are happy
agree.
to know.
Although I'll say anyone who sat through this much of the video should, at the very least, take an action to be more skeptical of the narratives that emanate from the Democratic Party establishment. I
Oh
think
yeah.
hopefully, if they've followed enough of this discussion, they can understand just how scripted it is and how contrived it is.
Hmm.
The end of the DA story, of course, is Brian Green was an Irondequoit Town Justice, and now they've appointed someone to replace him who was a registered Republican in 2016, then switched in 2018 to I can never remember if he switched to independence or switched to blank, but in 2019, the other, right? And then in 2020, he became a Democrat. And this is, to my mind, Morelle's ideal candidate. He really goes out of his way to empower people who have been affiliated with a party that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I thought George W. Bush was going to be the worst president of my lifetime. And I'm really not pleased to have been so wrong about that. But I also, as a lifelong Democrat, I think it's important to try keep using the levers we can and use our voices to encourage reform of the party. And that's really what this whole
Oh
initiative
yeah.
is about.
I mean, I think as long as Joe Morelle and Adam Beller are around, it's going to be very difficult. They control a lot of jobs, grants, contracts, and the way that those things interact with each other in our community is that you have a lot of nonprofit leaders who will never ever say anything because there's this scarcity mindset, and they'll never say anything critical of them or even advocate for their clients sufficiently because they're scared of angering the people in charge. And it is really unfortunate. It's a dynamic that exists in many places, but I think in our community in particular, there is this scarcity mindset that if you don't kowtow to these powerful people, that you will suffer in some way, whether it's again jobs, grants, or contracts. And that is not an unreasonable assumption given the retaliation that they are willing to use. Um, and people are scared, and it is not a good way to do politics. They're not going to be around forever, and I hope that we can build a different kind of power machine that doesn't necessarily rely on this kind of um, brass knuckle sort of politics. I mean, to some degree in our American system, we have a patronage system. We have civil service for a lot of jobs, but not all jobs. And so when you become the big cheese, you have a lot of power to do a lot of things for a lot of people. And that's how political machines are built. Where I think things have gone extremely off the rails in our community is that we can't have nice things because the people who run those political machines don't want us to, because it benefits them not to have us have nice things. And in Joe Morelle's case, it benefits his kid so that we don't have nice things, like a registry, like a basic registry. And that is the crux of the problem here, that these folks are benefiting themselves. And we don't have the normal checks and balances right now. The legislature has been stripped of power systematically over the last 40 years. We can get it back, but we'd have to have the will to get it back. And the press clearly has been decimated as well, and its capacity to do work on corruption and watchdog journalism, that has been hurt a lot. And so we have some problems here. And also the other one final thought here, I want to just leave you with. A lot when I was a reporter, there was a lot of I covered the Gantt Morelle wars all the time. You know, those two fought a lot, and it was seen as not good for our community. I have a bit of a different view on that now, because now we don't have anyone checking anybody. We don't have anyone checking Joe Morelle, right? I mean, David Gantt used to be the one to stand up and say, I don't know, that we shouldn't do things this way. We used to have a mayor, Bill Johnson, whatever you think of Bill, he used to stand up and say, maybe we shouldn't do things this way. We don't have those voices anymore in our community, except me. I mean, we don't have a lot of these voices anymore and I don't have any power. I'm a part-time county legislator. We do not have any voices in extremely prominent positions anymore that are willing to stand up and say, hey, you county executive, or hey, you mayor, or hey, you congressman, you're wrong. And you're hurting people with what you're doing. Nobody is willing to do that anymore at all. And so I would argue that back in the day, that was better than what we have now. Neither one was great. Because, I mean, Gantt had a machine too. And whatever you think of machine politics, he had one too. But wasn't anywhere near as strong as Morelle's is. And now Morelle's has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think we need some checks on that power. And there are checks available.
Yeah, I think future episodes and articles from Monroe Confidential are going to talk about some of the levers of power that we can all try to pull. There has been some ferment on the Brighton Democratic Committee seeking party positions and contesting primary elections for those. And we had a similar experience that's giving people pause about whether to continue to pursue that. But, I take some heart in New York State history, where even the courts have been a liberalizing force at times. Designating petitions used to have to be inscribed on green paper. I'm not making this up. That got struck down by the courts in the 1930s, not the legislature. There used to be one state senator per county. True story. And the Court of Appeals struck that down. That was struck down by the courts, not the legislature, because it's a pretty obvious violation of the constitutional right to one person, one vote. There are counties with fewer than 10,000 residents, I believe, so giving them equal voice in the state Senate. Anyway, that helps explain why there are exactly 62 senators, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, we need to keep talking and keep organizing. And, the simple act of shedding light on these things, I think, has a Heisenberg effect and can possibly influence future outcomes. And certainly voters can make more informed decisions, maybe when they go into the polling site.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you talking about this and caring and, taking time to really explain to people what they need to know about their government. We're getting there. I mean, slowly people are paying attention. We need more of them too. And I think we have momentum. I think this Airbnb thing, I think they really stepped in it. I think they did. I think it had all the elements of things that make people really mad. So I think we got them, and we just have to really explain why this was so important. Nick, this story was not about a short-term registry. That is not the takeaway. No, this was
I
not a
didn't take
story
it
about
to
a
be
short-term.
such. I'm so glad that we're going to learn more about it.
Oh, listen, I definitely I'm calling it the Airbnb lobbying files. I definitely have two parts. I think I might have three or four because I'm only on page 100 and I have to get through one page 169 pages, and it's upsetting. Like I'm sitting here reading this today. That's my activity today. Because I, have a job. We all have, most of our legislators have jobs, and this is the day I have to go through it, and I'm probably going to be up till midnight going through it all and writing it all up. But I would be, really grateful if people go to my Substack and read this stuff. I'm sure like 12 people will read all of my lobbying files, but at least it's out there, it's documented.
Yeah, we will have links when we
Okay,
post.
great. All
All
right,
right.
thanks, Nick.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm going to stop the recording now. And thanks everyone who's sat through this whole video. Till next time.